Morning and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today for this exciting webinar on the AI bubble, what HR should believe and what they should ignore. My name is Mark. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Rent a Recruiter. I'll be your host for this event, and more importantly, I'll be the timekeeper. Rent a Recruiter takes the headache out of recruitment for companies. We partner with a lot of SMEs, mainly those looking to scale and grow businesses without the need to hire an internal recruiter or deal with a lot of agencies. We embed our recruiters in the organization as recruitment as a service, and that helps to reduce cost and time to hire. And we've helped over 100 companies to date achieve their goals. I appreciate everyone coming to attend this webinar today. I promise to make it very informative, a session for everyone. It's mainly made up of HR professionals and talent acquisition professionals, so all are welcome. Before we begin, just a quick some housekeeping notes. Each speaker is going to talk for about 2 to 3 minutes per question. Then we're going to open the floor for a bit of a Q&A session at the end. If we don't get to your questions, I promise that I will go to the proper authority for an answer and come back to you as soon as we possibly can after the webinar. And also with these webinars, we are recording it. So if you can't stay or if your friend couldn't make it, we will be sending it on to everyone who has an event ticket. And then also we'll be putting together a little guide from the webinar as well that we can send out to everyone at a later date. So I just want to introduce the speakers we have here today. First, we have Dr. Gráinne Kelly. Gráinne is a senior lecturer in management at Queen's University Belfast. Her research is mainly focused on the impact of digital technologies on work, inclusion, women's careers, and the employee experience in SMEs. So welcome today, Gráinne. Really great to have you here. Andrew
Thanks.
Connolly is the co-founder and CEO of WrkSense. So this is a SaaS company. He has a background in recruitment technology design, building AI-enabled tools that support the hiring process for companies. So I know Andrew very well, as along with Gráinne as well. So really welcome to the conversation, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Mark.
And finally, finally, we have Kate Minogue. Kate, we did an MBA together, myself and Kate, and Kate's the founder of Kate Minogue Advisory. She's a fractional CPO and an AI strategy advisor. She specializes in all the good things: responsible AI, ethics, data governance, product strategy, and organizational transformation. So, with everyone here today, we have a really interesting mix of experiences for this subject matter. So, I'm super excited to get started. So, let's just jump straight into it, I suppose. Kate, is AI in HR overhyped or undervalued? What's your thoughts?
I think there's probably layers to this. I think if I look at how the tech industry talks about AI and HR, there is one thing that is massively overhyped, and that is a belief that the new role of HR is going to be managing agents as employees. I don't think we're anywhere near that. I don't think we need to worry about that. I think we can stay focused on what we're focused on. And agents in general are probably overhyped in the short term, reasonably valued, I think, over the medium term, but I don't think most organizations, particularly SMEs and definitely HR, are in a position to really jump in with fully autonomous agents in the next year or 18 months. And the reason that I say that is when we think about hype and value for AI and HR, we have to deal with the reality of the regulation, but also the sensitivity of the topic that is HR. So what is possible and the art of the imagination might be where the hype is coming from, but what is realistic and what is responsible is a very different story. And if we think about just the EU AI Act as a specific example, whether it comes this year, next year, 5 years, or changes, its intention is clear, and that is to have a definition of what is high risk and where we need to be more responsible around AI. And a lot of HR functions come in under what is high risk, just as finance functions do. And that is because you are dealing with personal data, but you are also dealing with personal opportunities for progress, whether that is access to money, opportunities in jobs, promotions, whatever that might be. So when I think about HR and AI, I think we have a responsibility to say, yes, we are going to get there and be ambitious, but actually in the short term, think a lot more internally about where we can, maybe push ourselves outside of our comfort zones and use AI tools to save ourselves time, but be infinitely more cautious when it comes to giving away autonomy or using personal data or putting AI in high risk places.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kate. That was the angle I was hoping you'd come at it from as well. So really appreciate that. Andrew, this seems like a perfect stepping stone for you, I suppose, coming from that kind of product and technology side, I suppose. Like, what's your interpretation of it, I guess, as well?
Yeah, I think what Kate said there is pretty accurate in terms of the hype around AI agents is it's just reached euphoria. I think the level, I think people are fatigued by what agents are, what they can do, and I do think you kind of need to go back a step because one thing AI has done is it made it super easy to make a really flashy demo and everything looks very attractive. But I think the other side of that is like it should be brought back to what problem are you solving? I agree that you won't be managing agents, but I do think you may be working alongside them. And when it's there, they should be very specific in the task that they're going to complete. So you may hand it off. But
Yeah,
like, look, from our perspective, it works sense. But even we see it across the industry, any meaningful implementation of AI has come with a huge human in the loop element. You need to keep the human in control, because AI, regardless of whatever the reason is, whether it's context windows or just lack of understanding of the domain or the task, they do go off the rails. And I think when the hype is, I think AI is here to stay, and I'm betting my future on that. But I think what it looks like will be very much around, I think it'll be controlled by the humans. They'll take repetitive tasks off the hands of those humans. Legislation will play a part,
yeah,
and by opening yourself up to, hey, go wild with AI, and every tool under the sun is operating, you quickly lose control because AI, in for good or for bad, doesn't rest, doesn't need time off, can do thousands, if not millions, of tasks at any given time. And I think the fear and I think the kind of advice that we would pass along is just to ensure that you're aware of what the AI is doing, and it's
yeah,
very, very small and very, very manageable, but that the human can keep an eye on what's happening. So yeah, that's kind of where I think the hype
yeah.
it'll deliver long-term value for sure, but in the short term, I would tread carefully as to where you apply AI, especially in your HR teams and your recruitment processes.
Yeah, yeah, no, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Andrew. Because I suppose as you're saying, like as well, like there's the large language models AI, and then there's all these kind of like periphery products around it, kind of coming out, and that's kind of where the hype is as well. So appreciate that as well. Gráinne, he mentioned human focused. It's still there. The people focus is there. Your angle on this, like, what's your thoughts about it? I suppose.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. I suppose I build on a little bit what both Kate and Andrew nicely mentioned there. And yes, I come from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And I guess for me, where I am most concerned is surrounding the hype that I suppose as an entity can judge talent. And I suppose by this, I guess I mean that AI actually becomes the assessor, judges human potential. And I've looked at this for quite some time over the past 2 years, kind of seeing the shift in terms of the incorporation of generative AI into hiring, particularly around video interviewing, CV ranking, or behavioral scoring. And there's a strong body of empirical work coming out that really lends itself to highlighting that AI struggles with this approach as AI as a judge because the human is essentially messy and psychologically complex. And there's loads of studies I could draw on, but if I just cherry pick two or three for today, and
Yeah,
again I can come back to these later on this afternoon. Um, but one for me really important was the that incorporated social presence theory. And this kind of helps us understand really that different communication mediums create different levels of human presence. And where we look at the automated video interview, they're very low in social presence. And this has strong implications from a diversity and inclusion perspective because low presence hires anxiety, it lowers performance. And this is especially the case for older workers, for migrant communities, and also for disabled candidates, and particularly neurodiverse individuals. So, in terms of the hype aspect, it's really important to look at the medium that you're using to incorporate AI here when we have discussions around hiring. Um, the other element, I guess, or another study that I would draw on, and I regularly do so, kind of as part of my teaching, is a piece that came out earlier in 2025 by Springle and Bordridge. Um, and this is really interesting study because it uncovers what are hidden fairness risks, which are particularly unique to the asynchronous video interview. And what they did, the study is really fascinating. used controlled manipulations, and they held questions, and the answer quality remained constant. And the only thing they varied in the study were things like the background lighting, the decor, the noise, the camera quality, and also things like presence of caregiving items and room size. And what they found was quite concerning. So the assessors and the AI trained on assessor rating scored candidates actually worse if they had things like a weaker lighting, a cluttered space, an
Okay.
older camera, you know. And so things for me, what struck me about this study is that lower socioeconomic status here becomes really visible. And this is completely unrelated to talent or a judge of human potential again here. So they're quite visible in this format. Um, and there's other studies I can draw on, but I guess the other kind of aspect, kind of building on that, I believe there's a lot of hype around, is the ability of AI to identify really top talent. Okay. And for me, a kind of, I guess what I would be drawn to talk about here is the really important concept of signal collapse. Okay. And this came, again, a study recently published by Galden and Silbert in 2025. And what they did for their study is they measured the ability of different candidates using both traditional mediums of interviews and then also the asynchronous video interviews. And participants completed writing and reasoning tasks. And again, our raters came in and evaluated the outputs. And their findings were really striking here. So what they found was that firstly, AI boosts low ability candidates much more than high ability ones. Okay, so if you're already a strong communicator in this sense, AI adds little value. But if you actually struggle, AI transforms your output. The second thing then they pointed to was the fact that output becomes uniform and quite polished. Okay, and this is the most worrying finding, really. So the likes of CVs, writing tasks, emails, grammar, all essentially look the same. Okay, so this is what they term as talk becoming cheap, as such. So this has important implications because the traditional hiring signals that we use, as part of a rigorous, design of our processes, essentially stop correlating with ability. And so what we have here is the important thing that it's very difficult for hiring teams, for recruiters to actually glean anything meaningful about underlying capability. And that's essentially what these scholars point to in terms of this notion of
Yeah.
signal collapse.
Thanks very
So,
much. Do you mind,
yeah, so
Gráinne?
thanks, Mark.
I'm just so conscious of time, and
Yeah,
like when
lovely. Thank
I
you.
listen to you all day. When you start citing articles as well, it's like it brings the bar up and all that too. But I'm just honestly just conscious of time as well with everything too. But
Thanks, Mark.
sounds really
Perfect.
really interesting as well. Like, look, I think like fundamentally, I suppose that puts us into a nice foundation for question two, which is kind of focused on like what parts of the HR process can. I suppose we're looking at smaller teams here now. We're not looking at the big organizations that have a huge bankroll that can take on all these AI projects and kind of like find out what works. These are companies that have to decide like, are we going to go with this? Or are we going to go with nothing as well, like that too? Andrew, kind of starting with you in this, I suppose, like that. Like, what parts of the HR process can small teams use and feel safe using today, and where should they be cautious as well, I suppose, on that side as well?
Yeah, I think this follows on nicely from some of the call outs Gráinne has
Yeah.
mentioned there. And I think it's going to be the recurring message throughout probably a lot of what we talk about today. But if AI is used for efficiency, there is major gains. So looking at the biggest blockers, like I can tell you, even from our own experience, some people don't get through all of the people that manage to apply. They're not,
Mm.
there is a bit of the integrity of the resume might have diminished slightly, and I think that's and then just the whole interview preparation side where I suppose the recruitment teams are unsure of what the candidates are doing with AI, and therefore creates this kind of a loss of trust in the entire process, which I think Gráinne alluded to well there. On the flip side of that, though, I think by outlining where companies will encourage people to use AI, because there's no question that it can be a huge help for both people
Yeah.
who are looking for a role, but it helps highlight the right signals. I think having a policy is step one, but then allowing your recruitment team be comfortable to cite that policy, to bring that to their thinking and encourage candidates. We'd like you to use AI for this task, or research our company. Like that is the strength of AI. And I think for all its negatives, it can be a huge positive, both helping candidates prepare, helping recruiters to kind of prep candidates, that whole candidate experience side comes through. So for me, I always go back to just rather than look at the tools and the technology, like the AI is just another technology. I think the key element here is what is the biggest problem that your team face
Yeah.
right now? So is it administrative tasks? Great. Well, AI is very good at that. Now, does that mean you get to completely offload all administrative tasks and assume they're getting done? And especially if those tasks have an importance down the line? No, absolutely not. But does it mean you can obviously get through every applicant? You can find, the criteria that you require. Obviously it is non-biased, but there's very simple things about, licenses, willingness to travel, different things that come up in hiring preferences, and similarly matching them against candidate motivators. Some people
Yeah.
want, people who want to progress their career super fast. Other people want people who want to stay in this role, learn and grow at a pace that suits them. Getting to the bottom of that, AI is really good at unearthing and matching that. But the motivators and the desires must be quantified
I
and
know.
and designed by the recruiter. So again, I'm never gonna. Don't think AI is really taking away humans out of process, but it's going to take away a ton of those tasks that they just never get to.
Yeah. No, no, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I suppose you're seeing that real first time in real hand as well when you're working on with companies as well. Gráinne, for yourself, like that kind of fairness or risk kind of showing up, I suppose there. What's your thoughts? And I'm timing you now, so I'm watching you. Okay, just
Sure. So, listen, thanks so much. No, and absolutely, 100% agree with what Andrew has just said. And my points are, I suppose, quite similar. And I guess I could add to that, yes, I fully see, the important administrative role that AI can play here. And I think that kind of moving, if we think of fairness and, diversity, again, inclusion aspects, if we think of the role of the HR professional in this, okay?
yeah,
So AI can reduce the burden, as Andrew has mentioned there, in terms of small HR teams by handling routine tasks, improving documentation quality, and freeing the capacity for strategic work. But if we think again, the implication of this on the HR professional, it's empirically shown to reduce what is levels of burnout when automation is handled in terms of those repetitive tasks. So it enables us to shift focus to more strategic tasks, which I think Andrew has nicely said. But for me, again, looking at the kind of holistic framework around the individual in terms of reduction in burnout, increase in well-being is a really important outcome to kind of consider, as you're thinking of what elements of AI do I want to bring into my organization. Thanks,
yeah.
Mark.
No, thank you. No, that's great, Gráinne. Like, and I think it makes total sense as well because HR always gets burdened with just a lot of work, right? So is it just going to fill it up
Yes.
with other stuff, or the hope is that they
Mhm.
become that kind of strategic approach? Kate, on to
Absolutely.
you. I remember hearing a podcast of you talking about recently where you said you have first of all to ask the question, is it necessary sometimes to implement something there as well? What's your thoughts on this question, I suppose, in answering it? Yeah.
Yeah, like I think it's a really interesting one because Andrew mentioned AI policies, and they're vital, but also they tend to paralyze some people in some teams because
Okay.
the minute there's a policy, people interpret as what not to do, so they do nothing. Whereas I would actually expand upon what Andrew said and say, don't just communicate what the policy means for candidates, but actually translate it into really practical things like safe zones and don't touch zones. And like that can be a simple starting point because the minute somebody knows I'm not to go near this, it frees them up a little bit to think about other things and vice versa. And I think the great irony of HR and AI is really recruitment and ATS were probably one of the first biggest scaled use cases of AI. And I don't mean in HR, I mean altogether, like recruitment led from an AI perspective. But it's also one of the ones we kind of are uneasy about now because we've seen all of the issues that Gráinne has mentioned. There's now decades of research on bias. There's all of those challenges. So it can be a bit distracting when people hear HRAI, they think recruitment, then they're told by regulations, don't touch, and then they run out of ideas or they paralyze again.
Yeah.
So I do always start with just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think there's
Mhm.
so much technology out there from the recruitment use case that I would be cautious about. Whereas if I think about a small HR team, the reality is they're wearing many hats, and maybe we want them freed up specifically for things like recruitment, performance management, other things like that that are very, very sensitive. And I remember hearing a very senior leader in Google, where let's be honest, in some parts of tech, they don't love the people management part of the job, but a very senior VP said, AI is great. It's, quote, made me a better manager because I delegate all of my people management to it.
Brilliant.
Now, my red alarm bells went off massively because I know all of the people who would welcome this message. And the anecdote that was shared was I promoted somebody I never would have. So that one anecdote is attempting to, dispel decades of research on bias and performance management risks and stuff like that. And it's just not the direction I would go. When I look at a really stretched HR team, I think, onboarding, very low risk to hand off to AI. Employee queries, that's something that you can automate quite easily. Compensation and benefits forecasting, doing analysis, stuff like that. But I would really look at, and this isn't just for HR, I do this myself, I think everyone should do this, and it's back to what Andrew said about the problem. Where are you spending most of your week that's really not what you're paid for, if you're honest about it? Like, what were you hired for? What is your special skill? What is the valuable piece of your time? And really on kind of on proportion, is that where your time is spent? I often talk about an example. A friend gave me a code for Superhuman to improve my email efficiency. And he was like, I save 5 hours a week and X, Y, and Z. I save nothing. I don't have an email efficiency problem. It was completely pointless. So start with your own analysis of where you need the time and with a don't touch and a safe zone. And I think you could actually come up with so many ideas and a lot of gains.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That really is great. Like great roundup as well of that question. Look, we're kind of flying through it, and I'm just conscious of time because we're kind of hitting that 21-minute mark, I suppose, or 22-minute mark. So just want to get this final question into it as well. Gráinne, it's for you. You're first for this one, okay? So, like, what is that one piece of advice, I suppose, that you would give a HR manager with a small team within an SME who wants to adopt AI without the resources, I suppose, like that, and what do you see kind of coming next for them as well, I suppose, as the next, we're going into 2026 now, 2027, like, what's your thoughts there?
Two big questions to
Big
answer, but
question, I know, yeah, no,
so I guess the first one there for me, again, teaching this on an inclusive
yeah,
curriculum, what I'd be focusing on, is the very simple task that one can do, particularly again in an authentic manner. So deploying tools that organize candidate information, generating behavioral anchors, highlighting gaps or inconsistencies, and then document reasoning. So all things essentially where the individual the human as it is, can retain full responsibility for actually scoring and final decisions. And for me, these what I term are highly, important. A structured approach is not only again empirically grounded, but also really feasible. I think Kate has already mentioned about the EU AI Act, which I'm really interested in to see what it's going to look like in the next year or two coming in. But it really, at the minute, it requires meaningful human oversight, transparent communication to candidates, and really high levels of traceability. And also really important here is the ability to challenge or override AI outputs. So again, the human has to lead everything that goes forward when we talk about the hiring process. Yeah, I'm trying to think anything else. In terms of picking up on points that I've mentioned, particularly around fairness in the
yeah,
process, we need to always go back to basics, and again, this has come up kind of as a theme throughout today as well. What is the purpose of our hiring process? And the purpose is, to ensure that we have a really sound system that ensures predictive validity, the ability to predict the performance of the candidate on the job. So for me, I would, focus on things like, having a strong, as I mentioned, for me, I use this term of structure everything, okay? Particularly when we come to fairness scaffolding, what I like to talk about. So, for example, use very structured questions, in the design of your ABI. And the STAR method, again, back to basics, is a really nice way of structuring an interview and also preparing candidates for that interview. And again, making sure that, if you're opening up your selection process to a diverse array of candidates, what are their particular needs and preferences? Particularly, again, something I didn't get to talk a lot about, but the idea of a neurodiverse candidate. So it's they have very particular communication styles, okay? And there are things that can, very simple things that we need to tweak that can ensure that the process that they meet is highly inclusive in nature. That's maybe for another webinar, Mike, Mark, but some things that would strike me anyway as being important.
No, thank you so much, Gráinne. Like, and I think even right now, even from a recruitment perspective, the standard recruitment process right now, interview is actually already biased, right? Because people are involved in it, they're not trained correctly in terms of like diversity and inclusion, bias training, and all that stuff too. So it's already kind of corrupted in that sense as well. AI on top of that probably isn't a good thing when it's not been kind of, refined as well. Kate, for you, and this kind of question, like, what's your advice? You're kind of helping out a small company, they got a small team, they brought you in to help, like, where do you go with them, I suppose?
So I think the two things that I would start with are one, what tools do you actually already have in place?
Mm,
So I was in a company recently and they brought me in for a full day workshop for all of the leadership and they were talking about, what are we going to do? How are we going to accelerate AI usage? And it came up a couple of times throughout the day that they had trouble getting sign off for new tools. And I said, okay, so you're a Microsoft house. And they said, yeah. And I said, so have you all done training in Copilot? No. Start
okay.
with what you have because you don't know what you need until you've used what you have. And it also helps you identify real gaps and challenges in it that will make you much more prepared for the conversations, the business cases, all of those things. So start with what you have. If you have an email, if you have a document stack, you have AI, like it's there. And it's more than likely the only thing that's in your AI policy right now. So I would say start there and help that inspire what you do first. And the second thing I would say is focus on outcomes that you're trying to drive instead of outputs. We hear a lot about driving AI adoption. We can drive AI adoption off a cliff if we don't know what we're actually trying to achieve. So whether it is a company trying to sell us a product, a leadership trying to get us to do something, always come back to the outcomes that you want, which should be very much related to the problem you were originally trying to solve. But I worry when people get so focused on efficiency that they start to accept worse outcomes because they're faster. So outcomes and existing tools are a brilliant place for small teams to start. I spoke to a HR person yesterday who has set up a load of custom GPTs for themselves for a lot of the different tasks they have. And now their leadership are bringing in an agent, we think, to take over that work. And the
Yeah.
first couple of attempts at using it, she's like, but now I have to retrain it on everything that I already trained ChatGPT on, and I don't understand the benefit. And my advice to her was go back and use ChatGPT and get your questions really clear for that provider on, well, what's different? And when am I giving up autonomy? Because that should be everybody's fear when you hear the word agent. Some people use it when they shouldn't, but if they're using it properly, it means you're giving autonomy away. So those are the questions that I would always get people to ask. The minute they hear agent or hype, really drill down into what's the USP, how is this different to what I have, what will I need to do to set it up, and how much autonomy or what autonomy am I giving away?
No, thank you so much for that, Kate. That's a really, really good answer as well. Andrew, you're closing out here as well. So best to last year now. We're high expectations as well.
No, look, and well, in fairness to Kate, she covered a couple of points I think are critical, and I'll just quickly
Stole
say,
them. Yeah.
assess your tools. Don't every
Yeah.
tool sounds great. You can just keep stacking them and then get no outcome. So I'll finish on that. I will just say something I think it should excite small companies because the big
Yeah.
companies already have it to a level. AI for these large companies is typically personalized, and I mean like they get to dictate workflows. They get to put a lot of input into the anything it's doing, right? The task is tailored to their organization. And that is typically the benefit of being a large enterprise because you've got these big partnerships and you've got a lot of money to throw at these problems and you see the success, right? You come across it in my journeys, particularly, you see some of the success that they've implemented a bunch of things. But one of the things I think is changing for certainly for the next year or two that should excite smaller HR teams, but also just smaller businesses, is that becomes a reality for them too. Like, knowing their organization, learning how how they hire, even just the types of people that have been successful in the past, all of that stuff that goes into making it important. Yeah, you're not going to build your own model, and that's not going to happen, but for sure, you're going to have your own knowledge base that gets to know your organization, manager preferences, things like that, that are really key and really time consuming because they send the wrong signals really for candidates, So I think there's a real opportunity and an excitement that personalized AI should trickle all the way down to smaller organizations, possibly
Yeah.
1 to 2 person, businesses that those personal GPTs that some people are using and some to great effect as well become more of a, an organizational wide thing. So I think hopefully I think is that's my clothing is there's some excitement there for business leaders. They got to stay in control and be careful what they hand off, but they should have something that might make a major business impact over the next year or two.
No, that's great, Andrew. So you're kind of saying like that, like the kind of they're working out the kinks from it from the kind of larger enterprise clients, and then it'll kind of flow down into the kind of smaller companies with the kind of finished product, basically, in that sense, like when they can scale it for better. Is that it?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think they don't. It'll be a lot more cost effective when they figure out
yeah,
the questions. Okay, so they're the questions to ask, like what the
yeah,
workflows do you have, what you're trying to do, and how to do it efficiently because you don't have these huge budgets. So yeah, I think that's a big
yeah.
change.
No, that's perfect. I'm just conscious of time because we're at the 30-minute mark as well and all that too. So there's a couple of questions, and feel free, obviously, anyone to jump in this, but I think this might suit you, Kate, specifically. So, um, for a small HR team that doesn't have like that legal kind of like specialization and doesn't really understand, like, what's a simple rule of thumb for checking whether AI tool is, I suppose, safe to use, I guess, like that too. There's always this kind of concern about like the data being taken for training and
Yeah.
all those other things as well. I'm just wondering, and feel free if Gráinne or Andrew want to jump in after as well, absolutely on that too.
I think sometimes this can scare people to feel like they need domain knowledge or professional
Yeah,
expertise to find these settings. But the reality is big tech have gone through a lot of iterations on this due to a lot of pressure externally on how transparent they were and were not about early versions of this. So I do think it's gotten a bit more user friendly, but I would say the things to look out for are any settings on data sharing, any policies on data sharing, and on memory. Often memory and training are used as words for sharing. So if I train the model for everybody else, that means the model owns my data. Like that's the translation for it. So I would very much, ask for a plain English explanation of the policy points that refer to data sharing, data processing, memory, and training. Because if somebody wants your business, then they should explain things to you and they should do
yeah.
it in writing. And you are very entitled to a plain English explanation of those things.
No, I appreciate that. And actually, an add-on question for maybe even for Gráinne or Andrew, like just from the audience as well, like if they're just using basic large language model tools, maybe like the paid version, I guess, like that for the, but it's still quite like the basic version, like, and you turn off the training element, are they safe to use? Like, how safe would you feel using them? Do we trust Sam Altman? I suppose like that too. Like, where do we sit with that as well? Because sometimes like buying in a platform might not be there in terms of the budget, but AI is all around us, Copilot, whatever, ChatGPT. I'm just kind of curious, I suppose, on that side too.
Yeah. I guess
Or for
I could
Gráinne,
come
yeah.
in here a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I guess, I'd be quite wary of the larger language models. Again, if we think of again, I come from this perspective of really trying to make sure you analyze the biases which they're being
Mm,
built on.
yeah.
So I think, all the work needs to be done before you just involve a large language model in your system. So for me, again, it's always about this operational focus and the structuring of the process, and it should complement what you're doing, but you really need to have a good understanding of what exactly it's adding and what data has it's been trained on. And then also really important point there is that the candidates that you're going to be working with, there needs to be that transparency that you're using these language models, in whatever shape or form. So
Yeah.
it's not sufficient just to say AI is being used as part of this hiring process. You need to be really clear. You need to really for me, have a statement as to what form it's being used. And that builds trust then with the potential employee and that's going to be involved in the process. And the other important
Yeah.
point there is about continuous auditing of any hiring process that
Yeah.
you are using large language models with. So if you adopt it and then find that it's really not working for you and there are flaws in it, there needs to be that iterative process of recalibrating it and not just leaving it go along because you think it's going to hire the candidate for you. So that's another important aspect to it.
No, thank you so much, Gráinne. Final word to you, Andrew. I'm just if you have anything else to add there from what Kate and Gráinne said.
No, I think it's good. I
Yeah.
think it's well covered. I think you said it there. If it's paid, it's a step in the right direction. I think Kate
Yeah.
made it clear there. I think check your policies, what
Yeah.
triggers are on when they reset. Unfortunately, you want to keep an eye on these things for not just they may change. I will say the black box era of this, I think everyone here is talking about bias. There's plenty of high profile legal cases going through the courts in different countries at the moment and legislation. So I think you're less and less at risk of these kind of non-auditable AIs, and there's a huge uplift in companies that will look we do as well that will test your model for bias and constantly, ongoingly test your model for bias or test some of the agents you're using. But it's going to be one of those developing spaces. So it is very much. I don't think we have the answer here. I just think the things you can do is if it's paid, you've got a protection there, you've got control,
Yeah.
and then you do have settings where you can um, you can control what you're pumping in because it's being used at desk level. People in their day to day all the time. So that's where I go back to the policy for good or for bad. I think just letting them know where it should be used and how it should be used is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Look, thank you, everyone. Thank you to my speakers for joining us in the conversation today. I feel like we've probably got an unplugged version here where we could talk for another hour or two about this topic as well. But just want to thank Kate and Andrew and Gráinne for coming today. Really, really appreciate your time and effort in that as well, and being, I suppose, being well studied for it and coming up with great content. And just to everyone here on the call. That's probably maybe the last webinar you'll be doing this side of Christmas. Thanks for joining us, especially in silly season. We're always doing a few webinars during the year. We'll be back next year again with a few more. And again, we will send out the recording along with maybe and also a documentation around the content of what we discussed today. And thank you so much and have a great day. All the best.